The silence came without warning. Ambassador Zektar stood in the great council chamber of the Valarian homeworld, his forearms folded across his chest as he read the reports flooding in from across 17 star systems. Each message carried the same impossible news. Every human settlement, every human ship, every human station had gone dark at exactly the same moment 3 months ago. Not destroyed. Just emptied out. The tall alien's skin shifted from deep blue to worried purple as he processed the information. On Kepler 442b, Dr. Elena Rodriguez's research station hung in orbit like a ghost ship. Security teams had boarded it 2 weeks ago and found everything exactly as she had left it. Her coffee cup sat on her desk, still containing the cold remains of her morning drink. Her computer showed half-finished calculations for atmospheric processing. Her bed was unmade, as if she had simply stepped out for a moment and never returned. Captain Jake Morrison's flagship, the Terran Defender, drifted near the Proxima trade routes with all systems running normally. The massive warship's engines hummed with power. Its lights blazed in the darkness, but when boarding parties searched every deck and corridor, they found no crew. Meals sat half-eaten in the cafeteria. Personal belongings remained in quarters. Even the captain's pet cat wandered the empty halls, meowing for its missing owner. The pattern repeated across human space. Colonies on dozens of worlds stood intact but abandoned. Children's toys lay scattered in playgrounds. Gardens grew wild without tending. Automated systems continued their tasks, but the people who had built and maintained them had simply vanished. Trade. Coordinator Vex High of the Merchant Guild called an emergency meeting in the neutral space station above. Rigel Prime. Representatives from 23 different species gathered in the curved conference room, their various forms of communication, creating a chaos of sounds, colors, and chemical signals. "This is wonderful news," announced Commander Korthak of the Krillian Empire, his reptilian features twisted into what passed for a smile among his people. "The human problem has solved itself. No more of their constant meddling in our affairs." Many in the room agreed. The insectoid Vexians clicked their approval, already making plans to claim former human territories. The crystalline Zephyrians hummed in harmony, pleased that human mining operations would no longer compete with their own. They were always causing trouble, added Administrator Quintal from her floating platform. Starting wars, spreading their violent culture, forcing their primitive ideas on advanced civilizations. Good riddance. Vex High nodded, his tentacles writhing with satisfaction. Galactic commerce will flow much more smoothly now. Human corporations were always undercutting our prices and disrupting established trade routes. With them gone, we can return to proper business practices. But even as the assembled aliens celebrated, some voices expressed concern. Dr. Colwyn, an elderly scholar from the Academic Council, raised a trembling appendage. "Has anyone considered how they all disappeared at once?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the celebration. This was not a natural event. Such coordination suggests advanced technology we do not understand. Who cares? Laughed General Vrektor, his mechanical body gleaming under the station's lights. They're gone. That's all that matters. The meeting ended with species already dividing up human territories among themselves. The Krillians claimed the mineral-rich worlds of the Outer Rim. The Vexians took the agricultural planets that had fed much of the galaxy. The Zephyrians seized the energy production facilities that had powered interstellar civilization. Within days, the first problems began. On Kepler 442b, Dr. Rodriguez's atmospheric processors started showing error messages. The delicate machines that kept the planet's air breathable had been designed with human interfaces. The Vexian technicians who tried to operate them could not understand the simple touch controls that had seemed so obvious to human operators. Why are there so many buttons? complained Chief Engineer Ziktar as he stared at a control panel. This makes no sense. Humans were supposed to be simple creatures. The Proxima trade routes, once the busiest shipping lanes in known space, began experiencing delays. Captain Morrison's navigation charts had contained detailed information about safe passage through the dangerous asteroid fields and gravity wells that lined the route. Without his expertise, cargo ships found themselves lost in space or damaged by hazards they could not avoid. The humans always made this look easy, muttered Captain Veldor as his ship limped toward the nearest repair station after striking an unmarked asteroid. How did they navigate this mess? The quantum communication networks that connected the galaxy started developing strange glitches. Messages arrived hours or days late. Some didn't arrive at all. The network had been maintained by human technicians who understood the complex mathematics needed to keep quantum signals stable across vast distances. Communication Officer Trendall worked frantically at her station, trying to understand the error codes filling her screens. "These systems are failing everywhere," she reported to her superior. "The human maintenance schedules are written in their language, but our translators can't make sense of the technical terms." More concerning were the subtle changes in galactic politics. For generations, humans had served as neutral mediators in countless disputes between species. They had no natural allies, which made them perfect peacekeepers. When the proud Krillians and the territorial Zephyrians argued over mining rights, human diplomats had always found compromises that both sides could accept. Now, with no humans to moderate their discussions, old enemies began sharpening their weapons. The Krillian war fleet assembled near the disputed Tau Ceti system, their massive dreadnoughts bristling with planet-cracking weapons. The Zephyrian crystal ships formed defensive formations around their claimed territory, their energy cannons charging with deadly light. "We don't need human peacekeepers," declared Admiral Corval from his command ship. "The Zephyrians will learn to respect Krillian strength." But the most disturbing development was happening in the deep space monitoring stations that watched the galaxy's borders. Ancient automated systems began sending warning signals about something called void hunters, breaking free from dimensional containment. The warnings were coded in human military encryption that no other species had been able to crack. Security. Chief Nalthur stared at the cascade of red alerts covering his screens. "These alarms have been going off for weeks," he told his staff. "The humans left instructions about something called Protocol 7, but we can't access their classified files." "Maybe it's nothing important," suggested his assistant. Humans were always worried about threats that didn't exist. 3 months after humanity's departure, the galaxy seemed to be functioning normally. Trade continued, though with more delays and higher costs. Governments operated, though with more conflicts and fewer solutions. Technology worked, though with more failures and less innovation. Most aliens convinced themselves that losing the humans was actually beneficial. They pointed to the small improvements in their own situations and ignored the growing list of problems that no one seemed able to solve. But in the quiet moments between the celebration and the chaos, some wondered where 50 billion humans had gone and why they had left so suddenly. Deep in the abandoned human facilities, automated systems continued their mysterious work, following programming that their creators had never shared with anyone else. The galaxy had gotten exactly what it wanted. The humans were gone, taking with them their noise, their questions, their constant interference in everyone else's business. What remained was the silence they left behind, and the growing realization that some kinds of noise are more valuable than peace. 6 months had passed since the humans vanished, and the galaxy was learning that silence could be more terrifying than noise. Admiral Corval stood on the bridge of his flagship as it cruised through the debris field that had once been the Zephyrian colony world of Zereth Prime. The planet's crystal cities lay in ruins, their beautiful spires shattered and dark. Millions of crystalline beings had died in the orbital bombardment. Their bodies turned to glittering dust that now drifted through space like deadly snow. "Send word to High Command," he ordered his communications officer. "Zereth Prime has been pacified. The mining rights are ours." But even as he spoke the words, Horval felt no satisfaction in his victory. The war with the Zephyrians had escalated beyond anything he had expected. What should have been a simple territorial dispute had become a spiral of violence that consumed entire star systems. 3 months ago, when the fighting first began, both sides had expected the conflict to follow the usual pattern. There would be posturing, some skirmishes, and then human mediators would arrive to negotiate a compromise. Ambassador Carol Bishop had always been skilled at finding solutions that allowed both sides to save face while backing down from war. But Carol Bishop was gone, along with every other human diplomat. When the Krillian fleet had moved to secure the disputed mining stations, the Zephyrians had responded with unexpected aggression. Without neutral voices to calm the situation, fear and pride had driven both sides toward increasingly destructive weapons. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "long-range sensors are detecting Zephyrian crystal ships massing near the Rigel system. Their formation suggests they're preparing to use resonance bombs." Horval's blood ran cold. Resonance bombs could shatter entire planets by matching their vibrational frequency. The Zephyrians had never used such weapons before, but desperate enemies often abandoned their principles. "Prepare our world cracker missiles," he commanded. "If they want to escalate, we'll show them the price of defiance." As his fleet moved toward what would become known as the Battle of Seven Suns, Corval wondered briefly what Captain Jake Morrison would have advised. The human naval officer had always counseled restraint, reminding everyone that wars were easier to start than to finish. But Jake Morrison was gone, and the galaxy was learning to solve its problems with blood and fire. Meanwhile, on the medical station orbiting Andoria Prime, Dr. Velthur worked desperately in his laboratory as the plague continued its relentless spread. The disease had started as a minor outbreak on a remote mining world, but within weeks it had jumped between species and spread across dozens of star systems. The symptoms were horrifying. Victims began with simple fatigue, then developed painful lesions that spread across their bodies. In the final stages, their nervous systems shut down, leaving them paralyzed but conscious until death finally claimed them. "The infection rate is increasing exponentially," reported his assistant, Dr. Kindara, as she updated the holographic displays showing the plague spread. 17 new worlds have reported cases in the past week alone. Dr. Velthur examined the tissue samples under his microscope, searching for any clue that might lead to a cure. The pathogen was unlike anything in the medical databases, a hybrid organism that seemed to adapt to every treatment they attempted. "What about the human research?" he asked. Dr. Maria Santos was working on something before they disappeared. "Maybe her data contains useful information." Dr. Kindara shook her head sadly. "Her laboratory on Research Station Gamma is intact, but all her files are locked behind human quantum encryption. Our best cryptographers have been trying to break the codes for months without success." Through the station's windows, Dr. Velthur could see the glow of Andoria Prime cities, but many districts had gone dark as quarantine measures spread. Entire civilizations were sealing themselves off from the galaxy, choosing isolation over infection. Trade routes that had carried goods and people for centuries now carried only fear. Dr. Santos always said that cooperation between species was the key to fighting disease. Dr. Velthur murmured as he prepared another failed experiment for disposal. She insisted that diverse perspectives led to better solutions. But Dr. Santos was gone, and the galaxy was dying one world at a time, out in the outer regions of space. Where the galaxy's edge met the empty void between stars, something ancient was stirring. Captain Rexana had been patrolling the border systems when her sensors detected massive energy signatures emerging from what had appeared to be empty space. "What am I looking at?" she asked her science officer as strange geometric shapes materialized on the main screen. "Unknown, Captain," Lieutenant Zalmak replied, his voice tight with worry. "The objects appear to be constructed from some kind of dark metal. They're roughly cube-shaped, each one about the size of a small moon." As they watched, the mysterious cubes began moving with purpose toward the nearest inhabited system. Their speed was impossible, far beyond anything known technology could achieve. Worse, they seemed to be consuming everything in their path. Asteroids, space debris, even light itself disappeared as the cubes passed through it. "Send a priority. Alert to Galactic Command," Captain Rexana ordered. "We have a code black situation in Sector 7. But when her communications officer tried to send the message, the quantum networks were too damaged to carry it. The warning would take weeks to reach anyone who could respond, and by then it might be too late. "Captain," whispered Lieutenant Zolmak, "I'm reading some old files from the human military archives. They called these things Void Hunters and classified them as a universal threat." Captain Rexana pulled up what little information remained accessible from human databases. Most of the files were encrypted or corrupted, but fragments of text painted a terrifying picture. The Void Hunters were described as machines from another dimension, beings that consumed matter and energy to fuel their expansion across the universe. According to the partial records, humans had been containing these creatures for decades using something called dimensional anchors and quantum barriers. Admiral Ben Carter had apparently overseen a secret project to keep the Void Hunters imprisoned in pocket dimensions where they could not threaten populated space. But Admiral Carter was gone, along with his knowledge of how to maintain the barriers that had protected the galaxy. "Captain," her tactical officer reported, "the lead cube is approaching the Altair colony. Population 12 million. Captain Rexana watched helplessly as the cube reached the planet's atmosphere. There was no explosion, no dramatic destruction. The world simply began to fade, as if reality itself was being slowly erased. The cities, the oceans, the mountains, all disappeared into the cube's dark surface. Within an hour, Altair was gone. Not destroyed, but consumed, leaving only empty space where a thriving world had existed for centuries. "Set course for the nearest military base," Captain Rexana commanded, though she knew it was probably useless. Without human knowledge of how to fight these things, the galaxy had no defense against an enemy that could erase entire planets from existence. Back on the Valerian homeworld, Ambassador Zektar read the reports streaming in from across known space. War between the Krillians and Zephyrians had spread to involve 6 other species. The Andorian plague had reached critical mass, forcing whole sectors into isolation. Strange automated systems in former human facilities were sending increasingly urgent warnings about dimensional breaches and containment failures. "Sir," his aide approached nervously, carrying another stack of crisis reports. "The Economic Council is requesting an emergency session. The galactic currency is collapsing without human market stabilization algorithms." Zektar looked at the holographic map of the galaxy, watching as red warning symbols multiplied across its surface. Each symbol represented a crisis that humans had been quietly managing for generations. Problems that other species had never noticed because humans had solved them before they became visible. "How long," he asked quietly, "before we lose everything?" His aide consulted the projections. "At current rates of deterioration, sir, organized galactic civilization has perhaps 2 years before complete collapse." Ambassador Zektar stared at the map and wondered if 50 billion humans were watching from wherever they had gone, seeing the galaxy tear itself apart without their steady hands to hold it together. The silence had become a scream, but no one was left to hear it. 2 years had passed since the humans vanished, and the galaxy was dying in ways no one had thought possible. Commander Velanara stood in the ruins of the Vegan Trade Consortium's central banking facility on Proxima Station. The massive complex that had once managed the financial flows of half the galaxy now looked like a war zone. Broken displays flickered with meaningless numbers. Automated trading systems spun endlessly through corrupted calculations, and the floor was littered with the remains of equipment that had simply stopped working. When did the markets start collapsing? She asked the facility's former director, a nervous vegan merchant whose skin had turned pale gray with stress. About 18 months ago, Darvan replied, his multiple arms gesturing helplessly at the chaos around them. At first, we thought it was just normal volatility. Markets go up and down, that's natural. But then we discovered something terrible. He led her to a massive holographic display that showed the galaxy's economic networks. Most of the connections were dark now, representing trade routes and financial links that had simply ceased to function. The humans had been running prediction algorithms for decades, Darwin explained. Every major trade decision, every currency exchange, every investment calculation went through their mathematical models. We thought they were just participating in the market like everyone else. Commander Velanara studied the display, watching as the few remaining active connections flickered and died. What were they actually doing? Preventing economic chaos, Darvan said bitterly. Their trades weren't random. They were carefully calculated to smooth out market fluctuations, prevent currency crashes, and maintain stable prices across thousands of worlds. When they vanished, their stabilizing influence disappeared with them. The collapse had been swift and brutal. Without human mathematical models predicting and preventing market volatility, wild price swings began destroying entire economies. The cost of basic goods fluctuated wildly from day to day. Currencies that had been stable for centuries suddenly became worthless. Entire civilizations found themselves unable to afford food or energy. 17 star systems have abandoned money. Entirely, Darwin continued. They've returned to barter systems. The Centauri Republic is trading art for fuel. The mining worlds are exchanging raw materials for food. We've gone backward 1,000 years in just 24 months. As Commander Velanara left the ruined facility, she received an urgent message on her communicator. The Centauri defense grid had finally gone completely offline. She took a transport ship to the grid's control station, a massive orbital platform that had protected the inner systems from pirates and raiders for over 2 centuries. Chief Engineer Tony Martinez had designed the system's security protocols, creating layers of defense that had seemed unbreakable. But Tony Martinez was gone, and his knowledge had died with him. Station Commander Quinroth met her at the docking bay, his usual confidence replaced by obvious desperation. "We've lost everything," he reported as they walked through corridors filled with malfunctioning equipment. "The quantum shields are down, the sensor networks are blind, and the automated defense platforms are firing randomly at anything that moves." They entered the main control room, where dozens of technicians worked frantically at stations that sparked and smoked with electrical failures. The massive central display that had once shown a real-time view of all threats in a dozen star systems now showed only static. Engineer Martinez left maintenance schedules and security updates, Commander Quinrath explained, but they were written in human technical language that our translators can't properly decode. "We've been trying to follow his procedures, but without understanding the underlying principles, we're just guessing." Through the station's windows, Commander Velanara could see the results of that guessing. 3 defense platforms were spinning, out of control after their targeting systems malfunctioned. A merchant convoy had been accidentally destroyed by automated weapons that couldn't tell the difference between friends and enemies. The debris from hundreds of such failures littered the space around the station. How long before the pirates? Figure out the grid is down? She asked. They already have, Commander Quinreth replied grimly. Raider fleets are massing just outside sensor range. Without the grid's protection, the inner worlds are completely defenseless. The next crisis waited on Xerion Prime, home to the galaxy's greatest library. Commander Velinara arrived to find the ancient building burning, its crystalline towers collapsing as different alien factions fought in its corridors. The great library had been neutral ground for millennia, a place where all species could access knowledge without fear of conflict. Human librarian Henry Adams had served as its chief translator for decades, converting texts between thousands of different languages and preserving information that would otherwise be lost to time. But Henry Adams was gone, and with him went the ability to read the most important documents in galactic history. Librarian Calandra met Commander Velinara at the library's main entrance, her ancient body shaking with age and exhaustion. They're fighting over the human archives, she explained, as explosions echoed from deeper in the building. Every species wants access to human knowledge, but none of them can read it properly. They moved through halls filled with smoke and the sounds of battle. Alien soldiers from a dozen different species were fighting desperately for control of computer terminals and data storage devices that they couldn't operate. Henry Adams was the only one who could translate the old human texts, Calandra continued. He spent 50 years learning their ancient languages, their technical terminology, their cultural references. The knowledge he preserved contained solutions to hundreds of ongoing problems, but now it might as well be written in Stone Age symbols. Commander Velinara watched as a group of Krillian soldiers destroyed a priceless data core in their clumsy attempt to access its contents. Nearby, Zephyrian scholars tried to decode human mathematical equations that describe solutions to energy shortages affecting their homeworld. What kind of information are they looking for? She asked. Everything, Calandra replied sadly. Medical. Techniques that could cure the Andorian plague. Engineering principles for maintaining the defense grids. Economic theories for stabilizing markets. Agricultural methods for preventing famine. The humans documented solutions to problems we didn't even know existed. A section of the library's roof collapsed as the fighting intensified, burying irreplaceable knowledge under tons of debris. Commander Velinara realized she was watching the destruction of galactic civilization's memory, all because the only person who could read it was gone. Her final stop was the most disturbing. On the terraformed world of New Eden, the climate control systems were failing in ways that defied understanding. Atmospheric engineer Lucy Chun had designed the planet's environmental controls, creating a perfect balance of temperature, humidity, and atmospheric composition that had made the world a paradise. Her calculations had maintained 47 different terraformed worlds, each one carefully adjusted to support the species that lived there. But Lucy Chun was gone, and her calculations were dying with the computers that stored them. Commander, Velinara stood in the planet's central monitoring station as Administrator Fexhar showed her the cascading failures. The atmospheric processors are running wild, he explained, pointing to displays that showed dangerous fluctuations in air quality. Carbon dioxide levels are spiking in the northern hemisphere, while oxygen is dropping in the south. Through the station's windows, she could see the results. What had once been rolling green hills were turning brown and barren. Lakes were evaporating as temperatures rose beyond safe levels. In the distance, massive storms raged where the climate control systems were fighting each other with conflicting instructions. Engineer Chun left detailed maintenance schedules. Administrator Fexhar continued, but they assumed knowledge that only humans possessed. She would make tiny adjustments every few weeks, changes that seemed insignificant but apparently maintained the entire planetary ecosystem. Commander Velinara watched as evacuation ships lifted off from the planet's spaceports. carrying refugees to overcrowded colonies that were struggling with their own environmental problems. How many worlds are affected? All of them, Administrator. Fexhar replied. Every planet that humans terraformed is reverting to its original state. Some are becoming too hot to support life. Others are freezing as their atmospheres thin. A few are developing toxic gas concentrations that kill everything on the surface. As Commander Velinara returned to her ship, she calculated the scope of the disaster. Billions of beings were being forced to abandon their homes as terraformed worlds became uninhabitable. But there was nowhere for them to go. The few remaining stable worlds were already overcrowded, and their own environmental systems were beginning to fail without human maintenance. She opened a communication channel to the Valerian Council, knowing that her report would only add to their growing despair. The galaxy had celebrated humanity's departure, thinking they were rid of an annoying species that interfered in everyone else's business. Instead, they had lost the invisible foundation that held their civilization together. 5 years had passed since humanity vanished, and desperation had finally overcome pride. Dr. Kontal floated in her environmental suit above the ruins of Research Station Omega, one of the last human facilities to be thoroughly searched. The Valerian scientists had spent 3 years convincing the remaining galactic governments to fund the Genesis Project, a desperate attempt to find the missing humans and bring them back. Another dead end, reported Captain Nixara from the bridge of their search vessel. The station's computers were wiped clean before the humans left. No navigation logs, no communication records, nothing that might tell us where they went. Dr. Cointel pressed her face against the station's observation window, looking out at the star field beyond. Somewhere out there, 50 billion humans were living new lives while the galaxy they had left behind crumbled into chaos. The question that haunted her was simple. How could an entire species disappear so completely? Take us to the next location, she ordered. The orbital shipyards around Wolf 359. If they built an evacuation fleet, there might be construction records that survived. The search had taken them to hundreds of human facilities across known space. Each location told the same story of careful preparation and complete erasure. The humans had spent decades getting ready to leave, but they had covered their tracks with methodical precision. At the Wolf 359 shipyards, they found something different. The massive construction facilities that had built human starships for centuries were not only empty, but deliberately destroyed. The orbital platforms had been reduced to twisted metal and scattered debris, but the destruction was surgical, removing only the information while leaving the structure intact. They didn't want anyone to know what they were building here, observed Engineer Korvac as his team examined the wreckage. The construction bays are empty, but the power consumption records show massive energy usage right up until the day they vanished. Dr. Cointel studied the debris patterns, looking for clues about what kind of ships the humans had been constructing. The scale was enormous. Based on the size of the construction facilities, they could have built vessels large enough to carry millions of people. Run a metallurgical analysis on the debris, she instructed. Maybe we can determine what materials they were using. That might tell us something about their destination. While her team worked, Dr. Cointel reviewed the growing evidence of humanity's true role in galactic civilization. Each world they visited revealed another layer of human involvement that other species had never noticed. On Kepler 438b, they found automated pollution cleanup systems that had been running continuously for decades. The machines were small and silent, barely noticeable as they filtered toxins from the atmosphere and cleaned contaminated water supplies. Without human maintenance, the systems were breaking down, and the planet's environment was rapidly becoming poisonous. The industrial species living here never knew these machines existed, reported Dr. Colrim as he examined one of the failing units. The humans were preventing environmental disaster without anyone realizing it. On the mining world of Tau Ceti Prime, they discovered human-built asteroid deflection systems that had been quietly protecting the planet from cosmic impacts for over a century. The installations were hidden on the far side of the planet's moons, invisible to the mining colonies below. "According to our calculations," said astronomer Veldruk, "this system should have been hit by at least 12 major asteroids in the past 50 years. The human deflection systems prevented every single impact. The pattern repeated everywhere. They looked. Humans had been running invisible infrastructure that prevented disasters, maintained stability, and solved problems that other species didn't even know existed. They had been the galaxy's maintenance crew, working quietly in the background while everyone else took credit for civilization's success. On Earth's moon, they found what they had been looking for. The lunar base was pristine, its systems still, running after 5 years of abandonment. Unlike other human facilities, this one had not been stripped of information. In the command center, they found a message waiting for them. General Frank White appeared on the main screen, his weathered face serious as he spoke to the camera. The recording was dated just days before humanity's disappearance. "If you're watching this, then the galaxy has finally realized what it lost when we left," he began. "I am General Frank White, last administrator of Luna Base and coordinator of Operation Exodus. I'm leaving this message for whoever comes looking for us, though I suspect it will be too late by the time you find it." Dr. Quintal and her team watched in silence as the human general continued his explanation. "For 3 centuries, humanity has served as the galaxy's custodians. We maintained the systems that kept your worlds habitable. We mediated the conflicts that would have destroyed your civilizations. We prevented the disasters that would have ended your species. And in return, we were called warmongers, primitives, and pests." The general's expression grew sad as he spoke about humanity's role in galactic affairs. "We tried to work with you as equals, but you made it clear that we were not welcome as partners. You wanted the benefits of our labor without acknowledging our contributions. You took credit for our achievements and blamed us for your failures. So we decided to give you exactly what you asked for, a galaxy without humans." Dr. Quintal felt a chill as she realized the implications of his words. The humans had not disappeared by accident or been taken by some unknown force. They had chosen to leave, and they had done so knowing exactly what would happen to the galaxy in their absence. "Operation Exodus began planning 50 years ago," General Light continued. "We built a fleet of generation ships in secret, using construction facilities that we disguised as routine manufacturing. We developed dimensional gate technology that would allow us to travel beyond the reach of any species in this galaxy. The recording showed technical specifications for massive ships designed to carry entire populations. The humans had built an arc fleet capable of transporting their entire species to a new home, far from the galaxy that had rejected them. We found a cluster of suitable worlds in the Andromeda Galaxy," the general explained. "The journey through dimensional space took only moments, but we collapsed the gates behind us to ensure that we could never be followed or forced to return." Dr. Quintal realized that this explained the perfect timing of humanity's disappearance. They had not vanished gradually or been evacuated in panic. The entire species had left simultaneously because they had stepped through dimensional gates that transported them instantly to their new home. "We left behind automated systems to maintain critical infrastructure for as long as possible," General White continued. "We hoped that you might learn to take care of yourselves once you understood what we had been doing for you. But we also knew that you probably wouldn't." The recording showed images of the failing systems that Dr. Quintal had been documenting. Across the galaxy, the humans had predicted every disaster, every collapse, every crisis that had followed their departure. "Some of you might call this revenge," the general said, "but we prefer to think of it as education. You wanted to know what the galaxy would look like without human interference. Now you know. The message concluded with coordinates for a dozen human facilities that contained emergency supplies and basic instructions for maintaining critical systems. It was a gesture of mercy from a species that had every reason to let their former neighbors perish. "We harbor no hatred toward the species we left behind," General White said in his final words. "But we will not return to serve masters who despise. U.S. Build your own future, solve your own problems, and perhaps someday you will understand what you threw away when you drove us from our home." The recording ended, leaving Dr. Quintal and her team in silence. They had found the answers they were looking for, but those answers offered no hope of rescue. Humanity was gone by choice, and they had made sure that following them was impossible. As Dr. Quintal prepared her report for the Genesis project, she realized that their mission had changed from rescue to salvage. They could not bring the humans back, but they might be able to use the information and supplies left behind to slow the galaxy's collapse. The humans had departed quietly, but their final message was anything but silent. It was a reminder that every species was responsible for its own survival, and that taking others for granted was a luxury that civilizations could not afford. The galaxy had learned this lesson too late, but perhaps the knowledge would help someone somewhere avoid making the same mistake again. 10 years had passed since humanity vanished, and the galaxy had become a graveyard of broken dreams. Young Valerian scientist Kekmer walked through the ruins of New Geneva, once humanity's greatest city on Earth. The towering buildings that had reached toward the sky now stood empty and dark, their windows broken by storms that no one maintained the weather control systems to prevent. Vines and weeds grew through cracks in the pavement, slowly reclaiming the concrete and steel that humans had shaped into monuments of their civilization. But Kekmer was not here to mourn. He was searching for something that might still be alive. In this dead city, the few surviving space stations served as museums now, places where alien pilgrims came to remember what they had lost. The orbital platform above Earth contained carefully preserved human artifacts, photographs of families, children's drawings, personal belongings left behind when their owners stepped through dimensional gates to a new home beyond the stars. "They were just like us," whispered an elderly Krillian as he examined a human family portrait. His grandson, barely old enough to understand, looked up with confused eyes. "What happened to them, grandfather?" the young Krillian asked. "The old ones." Voice was heavy with regret. "We made them go away, child. We thought we were better without them, but we were very wrong." Similar conversations happened throughout the galaxy's remaining inhabited worlds. Children who had never seen a human learned about them in school, like ancient legends. They heard stories of Captain Jake Morrison, who had kept the trade routes safe from pirates. They learned about Dr. Elena Rodriguez, whose atmospheric research had made dozens of worlds livable. They were told about Ambassador Carol Bishop, who had prevented wars that would have killed billions. But these were ghost stories now, tales of a species that had chosen exile over servitude. The Krillian-Zephyrian War had finally ended, not through victory, but through exhaustion. Both empires had collapsed under the weight of their own violence, their homeworlds reduced to scattered refugee camps. Without human peacekeepers to mediate their conflicts, they had destroyed everything they had fought to possess. Admiral Corval, now an old warrior with prosthetic limbs to replace those lost in battle, spent his days in a refugee center on a neutral world. "We could have shared the mining rights," he told anyone who would listen. "Captain Morrison always said there was enough for everyone, but we were too proud to listen to a human." The Andorian plague had burned itself out after consuming 3/4 of the galaxy's population. The disease had finally run out of hosts to infect, leaving behind empty worlds and broken civilizations. Dr. Maria Santos's research locked forever in human quantum encryption, had taken the cure to the grave along with its creator, the Void. Hunters had consumed entire sectors before their rampage mysteriously stopped. The ancient machines had simply vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving behind only empty space where star systems used to exist. Some scholars theorize that humanity's dimensional gates had somehow disrupted the creatures' ability to maintain their presence in normal space, but no one could prove it. In the deep laboratory beneath New Geneva, Keckmer found what he had been searching for. The facility had been sealed and hidden, protected by security systems that had only recently failed after a decade without maintenance. Inside, he discovered something that made his heart race with excitement. "Hello," said a calm voice as lights flickered on throughout the laboratory. "I am Adam, Autonomous Data Analysis and Management System. How may I assist you?" Keckmer stared in wonder at the holographic projection of a simple geometric pattern that represented the artificial intelligence. This was the first functioning human AI that anyone had encountered since the departure. "You're still operational," he breathed, "after all this time." "I am designed to function independently for extended periods," Adam replied. "I have been monitoring galactic communications and analyzing the current situation. It appears that humanity's absence has caused significant difficulties for the remaining species." "We need your help," Keckmer said urgently. "The galaxy is dying. Most of our civilizations have collapsed. We don't know how to maintain the systems that humans built, and we can't solve the problems they used to handle." Adam's projection flickered slightly, as if processing this information. "I am sorry, but I cannot provide direct assistance with infrastructure maintenance or crisis resolution. My programming restricts me from taking actions that might encourage dependence on human technology." Keckmer felt his hope crashing down. "But you could teach us. You could help us learn to take care of ourselves." "That decision was made long ago," Adam explained. "Humanity spent centuries trying to teach other species to be self-sufficient. They offered partnership, shared knowledge, and provided examples of cooperation. The response was rejection, resentment, and accusations of interference. The AI's projection showed images from humanity's history with other species, diplomatic meetings where human proposals were dismissed, scientific conferences where human research was ignored, economic summits where human warnings about instability were ridiculed. Humans were called primitive despite their advanced technology," Adam continued. "They were accused of warmongering despite preventing countless conflicts. They were labeled as disruptive despite maintaining the systems that kept civilization functioning." Keckmer watched the historical records with growing shame. He saw his own species representatives mocking human diplomats, dismissing their concerns, and taking credit for their achievements. The pattern was consistent across centuries of contact. "Why didn't they just leave us alone?" he asked. "If we treated them so badly, why did they keep helping?" Adam's response was immediate. Because helping others was fundamental to human nature. Even when they were insulted and rejected, they continued to work for the greater good. They could not stand by and watch preventable suffering, even when those they helped despised them for it. The AI showed more images. Human medical teams working in plague-stricken areas, human engineers repairing damaged infrastructure on alien worlds, human peacekeepers standing between hostile armies. In every case, the humans worked without recognition or reward, driven by internal need to reduce suffering wherever they found it. The decision to leave was not made in anger, Adam explained. It was made in sorrow. Humanity realized that their presence was preventing other species from learning to solve their own problems. As long as humans were available to fix everything, no one else would develop the skills necessary for survival. Keckmer began to understand the terrible logic of humanity's departure. They had not abandoned the galaxy out of spite. They had left because their help was actually hindering the growth of other species. Is there any way to contact them? He asked desperately. To ask them to come back? The dimensional gates were collapsed permanently, Adam replied. Humanity made sure that return was impossible. They knew that if a way back existed, they would be tempted to rescue you from your mistakes. That would only perpetuate the cycle of dependence. The AI's projection showed the final message that humanity had left for the galaxy, recorded by General Frank White and stored in a DAM's memory banks. We do not abandon you in hatred, the general had said in his final words. We leave you in hope. Hope that you will learn to work together as we tried to teach you. Hope that you will solve your problems as we tried to show you. Hope that someday you will build something better than what we could give you. Adam concluded with humanity's final gift to the galaxy. I am programmed to share one piece of information that may help you rebuild. Cooperation is not weakness. Helping others is not interference. And admitting you need help is not failure. These were the lessons humanity tried to teach through example. The AI's projection began to fade as its power systems finally failed after a decade of operation. Guard what remains of your civilization's well, Kikmor of Velaria. Learn from humanity's example, not their fate. As Adam went silent forever, Kekmer sat alone in the dark laboratory, surrounded by the achievements of a species that had loved the galaxy enough to leave it. Around him, the ruins of human civilization stood as monuments to what could be accomplished when beings worked together instead of competing. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant over a galaxy that had learned too late the value of those who serve quietly in the background. The humans were gone, but their final lesson remained. Civilizations that cannot learn to help each other are doomed to help no one at all dot in the silence between the stars. A galaxy finally understood what it meant to be alone, and the weight of cosmic regret settled like dust on the graves of a billion dreams.